2 weeks ago, I was standing in front of an audience of 93 people in the APC. I was moderating an employee panel ranging from new employees to mid-level career at Northrop Grumman. And I had this moment when I was gazing into the audience where I thought, isn't this my biggest fear? For as long as I could remember, public speaking was up there with my biggest fears, such as getting eaten by a shark, going in the ocean in general, and yet here I was and am now in a role that requires a lot more public speaking. My experience with public speaking began about 2 decades ago. I was in first grade, and my teacher had this thing called Monday morning messages, where every Monday a student would be assigned to give a presentation to the class. It was basically show and tell for 30 seconds to a minute. And every Monday before, I would spend in sheer agony. My whole family felt it. They would be searching the house with me to find something that I could talk about in front of my peers, that I wouldn't burst into tears or, just shut down for the entire day. So the first time that I did my Monday morning message, I think it was so traumatic that I just blocked it from my memory completely. And the second time that I did it, I wised up and I delegated to my dad. I said, hey, can you bring in my pet bunny to class and talk about him? So I introduced my dad, and he talked about my rabbit, and it was fantastic because I basically avoided the entire Monday morning message. And as I alluded to, fear is such an ironic thing. It's public speaking. I'm in a role now that requires it, and it's up there with my fears, as I mentioned, the ocean and sharks. So almost every Sunday I go down to the beach with my book, and I run to the ocean's edge. I dip my toes in, and the waves suddenly look big. And I think I'm going to dive in the water, but then I'm not because I think of the sharks that are out there, so I run back to the shore. And it wasn't until about 4 months ago I was in Florida, and I went down to the beach, and I knew in the back of my mind that Florida has more shark attacks than pretty much anywhere else in the world. And even still, I went down to the water. The water was warm. It was also murky. There were dolphins out playing. I knew there was sea life, and I ran right in the water. And I realized at that moment that I wasn't afraid of sharks or the ocean, but just cold water. So an ironic thing about being also afraid of the ocean and cold water, I was a swimmer for 15 years. I swam all the way through college, and every morning I dreaded getting in the water. It was so cold, like I said. And I noticed, even as a competitive swimmer for 15 years, the closer that I got to an actual race, the more nervous that I got. I would start doubting myself, having a lot of negative self-talk. I would constantly start thinking that I wasn't prepared enough for my event, that I hadn't trained hard enough, that I hadn't eaten well enough for that day. Whereas the days, weeks, months leading up to, say, a big performance, I would be pumping myself up every single day. So I noticed that I do a similar thing with public speaking, and one thing that helped me segue or transition that nervousness, it came in a very unlikely scenario. I was in a telecommunications class during my undergrad, and I had a professor mention the difference between being nervous versus being anxious. The body physiologically responds the same exact way. So your heart rate increases, you become more alert, you get kind of jittery. The only difference between the two is if you're anxious, it's like being nervously excited. So if you tell yourself that you're like really excited about it, then you're going to approach the situation better and likely have a more positive outcome. So I took this to my swimming races, and it felt like a total lie to myself. I would be saying, oh, I'm so excited for this race, instead of I'm going to do so bad, I don't know if I can finish, I'm going to choke on water. And when I started just telling myself, even though it was a complete lie, I'm so excited about this, it ended up being a lot better overall for my performance. I swam faster, and it made races a lot more fun. So with that, I have confidence that joining Toastmasters is going to help me develop my public speaking skills so I can be more confident and a more engaging communicator. As I said, the comparison between 2 decades ago in first grade, where I would be bright red in the face, which I might be right now, I don't know, I'll find out after, about to burst into tears and just in pure agony, afraid of what was going to come out of my mouth, to where I was 2 weeks ago and where I would like to grow into in my career. I have confidence that Toastmasters will help me develop those skills to be a better communicator or public speaker, especially when my boss jokes to me that there's a chance I might have to step in and facilitate the entire day, which is kind of terrifying to me. I have to remember that I'm not afraid of sharks.